Hello, everyone, and welcome to DILAN Delivers, our free webinar series from DILAN Consulting Group. I am Dr. Eugene DILAN, and I'm going to be your host today. We're thrilled to have you here for this important, timely, and essential conversation. From feedback to firing, the essentials for managing employee performance. Our expert speaker today is Lisa Ann Hilario. She's an employee attorney and partner at Spaulding, McCullough Tansil. A little bit about DILAN Consulting Group before I tell you more about Lisa. And so I want to say that DILAN Consulting Group has been around for 14 years. We're a boutique consultancy of psychologists, and we are based in the San Francisco Bay Area, and we basically help organizations to strengthen their leadership, build better teams, navigate change, always keeping the employee at the center of these changes. With that, I want to underscore that our trademark is business is human. Really what that means is that we are principled and our approaches are really human-centric. You bring the expertise in terms of your business. We bring the expertise in terms of understanding people. And together we create the conditions that help to elevate your leaders, elevate your teams, and drive performance in your organization. So I want to say that this is not the first of the series. We've actually done a few others and we'll be doing more. So if you want to see what we've learned from some of the other lovely guests that we've had in the past, you can just visit our website at dilanconsulting.com and go to DILAN Delivers, and you'll be able to see these. That said, I'd like to say that I want to introduce Lisa Ann Hilario now, and I'm going to tell you a little bit more about her. So please hold. So a little bit about Lisa Ann Hilario, and I must first say that I had the privilege of meeting Lisa Ann Hilario at our Provisors networking meetings. I think that's important. I want to give a plug to those of you who have not joined. But Lisa Ann Hilario is a partner at Spaulding, McCullough Tansil. It's a full-service law firm located in Santa Rosa, serving the Bay Area for over 25 years. Lisa Ann provides proactive employment law counsel to businesses to help them efficiently manage human resource issues, prevent employee claims, and defend against employment-related lawsuits. You can learn a whole lot more about her and her firm at smlaw.com, and the link is actually going to be right here in this next slide that I am about to share with you. Oops, I went a little too far in my slides. There we go. There we go. Everything else that you might need to learn about Lisa. And what I might add is this, is that Lisa has also taught at Santa Rosa Junior College and Sonoma State. And so if that alone doesn't underscore that she brings the expertise, I don't know what does. So with that, I want to invite Lisa to turn on her camera. And we're going to jump in and move forward. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let's proceed with this interview.
Good morning, Eugene. Thank you so much for having me, and good morning to everyone participating.
Good morning. It's so nice to have you here, Lisa. We've been talking about this since January, just so everybody knows.
Yes, we have.
And I want to just start off a little bit more casually before we jump into the more meaty questions. Lisa and I spent a little bit of time picking out the questions that we thought would be most helpful to you. And so what I will say is that I wanted Lisa to say a little bit about why she chose law and how long she's actually been in the law industry. So tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, the why I went into law is probably because I'm the oldest of five. I was always very argumentative, shall we say, with my siblings, and my grandmother, whose brother was a lawyer, told me from early on that I should be a lawyer when I grow up because I have such clear arguments. So that's probably just kind of where the idea came from. But then I just found that I really like the challenge of evaluating legal issues. And I really chose employment law because I like to help clients prevent problems. There's enough problems. We don't need more. We can really prevent them. And so My favorite part about it is helping clients to learn about the laws, which are very challenging, especially in California, and then just develop ways that they can provide the service or produce the product that they're in business to do while treating their employees well and complying with the laws. And so I've been practicing law for 33 years. I've lived in Santa Rosa since I was 3, except for school. So I've been here practicing law for 33 years, and I love it, and really enjoy the opportunity to work with clients. And I see lots of my clients on the line today. So hello, everyone. And to those of you that I haven't met before, I hope we do meet in the future.
Excellent. So, Lisa, you said something there. You try to help people prevent problems. So my one question for you is this. What is the one simple thing that people really should do but don't do, even though it's an easy lift, that sometimes ends up causing them headaches later? What's the one simple thing that you would recommend?
So I would recommend, and this is not a plug for attorneys, but what I find is that oftentimes people make the handshake agreement with an employee, or they develop a sales plan, or they prepare a document, and it makes perfect sense to them for their business. But what they don't realize is that it doesn't follow the law. And so they've already put it out there for the employee or someone to develop their expectations. And it's really hard to draw that back once you've had the handshake agreement. So and I think it's true for any area, really getting an expert in the field involved early will help you avoid the problems. And even if, most of the time, if I tell you we can't do it exactly the way you want to, I can find and problem solve with them a way to get to the same result, but in a way that will be compliant. So just getting the expert in the field involved ahead of time is probably, it will save you money in the long run. It will save you headache. It'll save you disputes and allow you to really focus on your clients, your customers, and your business rather than on a fight that comes up later.
Okay, so be wary of the informal handshake and get your legal expert in early. So this is how you can avoid any issues. Excellent.
Yes.
All right, so let's jump into the meat of today. We have about 7 or 8 questions. We will take some questions if you put them in the chat. At the end of our conversation, I'm going to circle back and choose a few. And then hopefully, if time permits, Lisa Ann will have a chance to respond to those as well. But today's first question is, what are the basic elements of managing employee performance?
Sure. Thank you. And, when I think about it, a lot of people think automatically documenting performance issues always means it's negative, right? And that's really not the case. It's probably more common that people will take the time to document a negative performance characteristic, but I maintain that it's just important to document the good ones as well, because it helps your employees feel invested, it helps them feel appreciated, and it also gives you an understanding of what, how the year has been when you go to do a performance review or you go to consider salary increases. So I just want to start off with saying I'm probably going to focus more, or you probably are all attending with the thought of how can I deal with that difficult employee, but I maintain that this will apply to whether it's good or negative performance you're trying to deal with. So first of all, the basic elements are from the very beginning is setting clear expectations. It's really important that if you are going to analyze or evaluate someone's performance, that they have a good understanding of what your expectations of their performance are. And that's typically done with a job description, but more commonly with written and verbal communication. I want the report by this time. I would like the sales aspects to include the following elements. So that's where we start. If they don't have clear expectations, they don't stand the best chance of meeting your expectations if they don't know what they are. The next thing would be ongoing communication and feedback. One of the problems that happens is that people wait until they're either the straw that broke the camel's back to sit down and talk to someone about the negative performance, or they wait until the performance evaluation time comes around. But I maintain that managing employee performance, for better or worse, includes ongoing communication and feedback. And that can look like regular check-in meetings. It can look like individual emails or sitting down and talking to someone to give them constructive feedback. It's also an opportunity for there to be a two-way dialogue. It's only in talking with each other or in writing to each other that we know if we are meeting each other's expectations. And then ongoing communication and feedback is more likely to result in improvement in the performance rather than waiting until the end of the year or the review period to sit someone down and say, you really haven't been meeting my expectations on this. So ongoing communication and feedback is the second thing. The third thing I think is about coaching and development. It's important to make sure that your employees have the training and the support and the coaching and the tools and resources they need to do the job and to do it in a way that meets your expectations. So don't hesitate to include that as part of your employee performance management. Then there are the actual performance evaluations. Those can be formal written reviews. They can be informal feedback that you then document to the employee. The document could be a performance evaluation. It could be a simple email. The report was late. I understand you're going to get it to me by Friday. And in the future, please be sure to let me know if you can't meet a deadline, and let's set a new one. Please don't wait for me to check in with you, for example. And then it's also important to have recognition and reward. You won't be managing an employee's performance very well if they only hear from you when you're not happy. So giving them a kudos or congratulations, recognizing them to other managers or the workforce on a job well done is important. It also helps to balance out. If all they hear is the negative, they can feel like they aren't appreciated, as opposed to giving kind of a balanced review. You did really well on these things. I'd like to see improvement in these other things. And then, of course, actually taking corrective action if you need to. So a warning, a record of conversation, and then finally outlining the accountability and the consequences. I really need to see this improve. If not, we may need to look at a warning. We may need to look at a revision of your job or whatever it might be. And then finally, ensuring that you consistently provide feedback to that employee and others that have similar jobs or are engaging in similar conduct that you're trying to correct. So those are the basic elements of managing employee performance just from a very broad perspective.
Okay, I love what you shared in terms of documenting the positive. And what I think I heard you say was to be transparent about that so that people know that you're also I love that the idea of setting expectations. You give people a roadmap to success versus you put them in a car without a map and they don't know where they're going. And the idea of dialogue and development. So that's all great stuff. And I'm going to underscore it as I just did. And now I'm going to move us on to the next question. Why is it important to document employee performance issues? Why write it?
So picking up where you left off, number one, and I think very important, is it ensures fairness and transparency, right? You want your employees to know what you expect. That's the best way to not only get a result, but to make sure that the process is fair for them. It also helps you to make sure that you're applying consistent standards across employees who are in similar positions or are engaging in similar conduct. It also helps prevent misunderstandings. You and I may think we have communicated about my expectations, but it's only through speaking with you or emailing with you and listening to your response that I can really be sure that you and I have the same understanding about my expectations. And a lot of people think that employee performance documentation is about punishing someone. What I like to look at it as, it's an opportunity to let the person know, look, I'm not happy. And this is what I'm not happy about. And this is what I would like to see from you. So the ideal goal of giving performance feedback is not to terminate someone. It's actually to get them to improve. You've spent a lot of money in hiring and training this employee. They're a part of your culture. They have friends. It's not good on morale to have high turnover as a result of terminations. So giving them a roadmap to improvement increases the chances that they will improve their their performance, and that they will meet your expectations and you won't be constantly recruiting and training. It also is important because when it does come time to do the formal performance review, you will have documentation to look back on, and you won't be preparing a review just by memory. It's really easy, especially if you have an employee who's challenging, to remember only the negative things. It's also really easy to remember just what happened in the last month and forget that this review period is a year long or a quarter long, and perhaps things were great in the last month, but 2 months ago they weren't meeting your expectations, or vice versa. This month they're not meeting your expectations, but 2 months ago they did something wonderful. So by having employee performance issues documented, you can look back on that entire review period and recognize the achievements, discuss the performance issues, and it helps you keep track of those and use them. It also is helpful for you to review when it is time to make a decision about a promotion or a compensation increase or career advancement. If you don't have it, you tend to go around and just ask people, what do you think of John? What do you think of Sue? And you may get a biased response. You may get an uninformed response. And then, importantly, if the performance does not improve, the documentation builds a record for the future action that you need to take. So if that future action is a documented performance meeting or a warning, you have documentation or a record of having let the person know your expectations, showing them fairness, providing them tools, letting them know they weren't meeting your expectations. And that way, it doesn't look like this came out of the blue when they just asked you for a pregnancy leave, that you're all of a sudden now commenting on negative performance. Because in my world, what employees do with that is to say, hey, my performance was great until I said, or my performance feedback was great until I told them I was going out on pregnancy leave. And then I got this warning. Well, if you have a record of having talked to that person over the last quarter, the last year, you can show this is not the first time we've discussed this. Yes, it's true. This is the first time you're getting a warning, but we have this record of previous conversations and emails about your performance. And then finally, the purpose is that it does protect you against legal risk. You're able to show this isn't something new that came up right after you made a workers' comp claim. You are able to show that you have this roadmap of attempts to improve. And what I always tell clients is, you hope that a claim is not made. But if a claim is made, and you end up having to go to a trial or a mediation, what the first thing somebody's going to want to see is that you treated the person with respect and fairness, and you didn't just come in and terminate them. And so this documented series from beginning to end really helps in doing that and is really important. As I said, ideally they get their employment, their performance improves and everyone is happy. But if the worst happens and you need to take disciplinary action, it will help you in that, supporting that action.
Okay. I love that the documentation helps in a lot of ways to reaffirm or reassert the expectations. I love that you said that it protects against the recency effect. If they've recently done well or done poorly, you don't want that to flood your whole evaluation. And I love that through proper documentation of what they're doing well and less well, you're actually able to show that you've been fair if it does come to a negative outcome at the end. All good stuff. And I'm going to move on to the next question because they're here to hear you.
Okay.
Equally important to document performance changes in employees who have been high performers.
I would say it's not only equally, it's almost more important. It's very common for a strong or high performer to not always be that, right? We have things come up in our lives that can affect our performance. We can have family or personal issues. We can have health issues. So it's not uncommon for the rock star to have a blip in their performance, shall we say.
Human.
And it's so important when you have a high performer with strong performance reviews that if they're all of a sudden not meeting your expectations, that you address that and document it. Because what happens is if there is a negative result, if in the end you find that the performance doesn't improve, and you want to take some action, you need to be able to explain the shift. You know, why is it that they had glowing performance reviews and then all of a sudden had a warning? And so once an employee you need to be able to explain why is it that this employee that you once considered excellent or exceeding expectations is now on a performance improvement plan or is being terminated or demoted. The documentation of expectations and performance challenges will help you show or explain the reason for that shift. Without it, the employee who is the high performer, the first thing they do or their attorney does is ask for their personnel file and all their performance evaluations, and they point out the exceeds expectations ratings, and they say, hey, the fact that there is nothing negative in this performance file and only positive indicates that the new supervisor came in and unfairly targeted this employee, or that the employer is really discriminating or retaliating against the high-performing employee based on some protected characteristic as a cover. Or gave the warning as a cover for what is really discrimination or retaliation. It's really because they just came back from pregnancy leave, or it's really because they told you that they plan to take a leave of absence in the near future to take care of their ill son. So having the performance documentation that's accurate, whether it's good or bad, will help explain the shift from why this person got exceeds expectations, or maybe never had a performance review at all, which the implication by plaintiff's attorneys is that means good performance. Otherwise, you certainly would have documented it. So it helps explain the shift. It helps you in defending if there is a later discrimination or retaliation claim, because you're able to point to the documentation of the performance issue that you made in real time, you know, before I asked for pregnancy leave, that you objectively documented it and that you addressed it sufficiently and consistently. It also, by documenting it early, allows them to correct it. And when you can show that you gave them notice and they had an opportunity to correct and they failed to do so, that can be used as a defense against a claim that you took the action because of a discriminatory or retaliatory purpose.
So in a lot of ways, documenting even those high performance people who have shifts is really about you making sure that you're controlling the narrative, that you're kind of telling the story before somebody else comes in, connects the dots and creates their own story.
Exactly.
So really important to be proactive there. Okay, so what are some of the best practices for documenting employee performance issues?
Okay, and I train managers on this a lot, and there are many resources for this, but I'm going to go through the ones that I especially like to emphasize. The first one is using clear and objective language. Use data and facts. If there are metrics, they didn't meet a sales goal, identify that. If you got a client complaint, identify who the client was and what their complaint was. What I find is when I ask employers to send me their documentation, when I'm advising about taking action against an employee, I find that the documentation is often very subjective and very vague or conclusory, such as the employee was rude, the employee used profanity, the employee threatened another employee, the employee was in my face, or they were acting drunk. Those are all conclusions and subjective statements that require you to be inside the head of the person who is making those statements. And the fact is that what you consider profanity may not be what I consider profanity. And the fact is, being in my face might be 2 inches from my nose or 3 inches or 3 feet from me. It really depends on the perception of the person who's making the statement. So I recommend using facts and not conclusions, or if you're going to use conclusions, identify the facts. So instead of saying the employees' sales are down, you would say the employees' sales for December of 2024 were 10% lower than the sales figures for December 2023. Or I received a complaint about Sue's performance from ABC Inc. They called to say that she used profanity. They reported that she used the following language. And let me encourage you to quote the person. Please do not be afraid to use profanity when you are documenting profanity. If the person reported to you that the employee said, use the F word, for example, please put that in the document. Now, if you don't want to spell it out, if the person said the word, but you feel uncomfortable spelling the word out, then say, use the F word. But if you just say profanity, some people think using God's name in vain is profane, or some people think that using the F word is a bigger offense than another person might. So document what was actually said or reported. Don't be afraid to do that. One of the best performance indicators to me is when a third party that has no knowledge of your employee, has no interest, doesn't know they just came back from pregnancy leave, doesn't know they made a workers' comp claim, makes a complaint, because that is, first of all, you don't want that because that's who you're in business to serve. It's a much bigger deal if a client or a customer complains than if another employee complains, because it potentially affects you losing business. So if you're able to report that you received a call from a specific client who reported that Sue used these words, that's very powerful. It's not the only thing you would base your documentation on, but those are good examples. The other thing I want to caution is that many times in this world of computers, we overwrite the evidence of our employees' mistakes. So if you have a bookkeeper who is making data entry mistakes and inputs 1,000 instead of 100, or something like that, and you catch the error, if you go in and correct it, you have destroyed the evidence of that error. So my advice is print it out, attach it to your documentation so that when it's corrected and printed out, you still have evidence of the error. Also being sure to document positive and negative so that you can show balance. Providing the feedback in writing. Emails are very helpful for that. The trick is, and I have no problem with documentation being in the form of an email. The problem is you have to save it. And if it's buried in your sent file and you delete your sent file once in a while, it never gets to the employee's file. And then when you go to prepare a review or take action, or I ask you, please send me all your documentation, you either have a lot of work to go through to find it, or you don't have it. I have a couple other things, but did you have a question?
I did. Some of the things you just gave examples for are kind of concrete. In the case of somebody being inebriated or high on the job, what descriptors might you use versus saying they're high or saying they're drunk? I have my own ideas, but you're the expert.
Yes. So I actually get this question a lot, and I actually have a checklist that I give to my clients that they can use. And what you're basically looking for are the physical attributes, the actions or inactions of the employee that led you to that conclusion. So it's okay for you to say the employee seemed high or the employee seemed drunk. It's just not enough, because what we need to know is, what did you observe? Did you smell? Were their eyes red? Were they staggering? Were they having trouble finding their words when they normally don't? So I have a checklist of were they falling asleep at their desk? What is it that led you? And so that checklist is to kind of prompt, because I had that issue with client supervisors reporting this to their HR people, but they didn't have the skills or perhaps the knowledge to really pinpoint the facts. So I have a checklist that people can check off. Oh yeah, they had blurry eyes. They were, they got overly emotional when telling me about something at work or whatever. So that's one way that we do that.
Thank you. And you were going to make a few more points when I rudely interrupted you. I'm sorry.
Oh, no problem. So part of documenting employee performance issues isn't you documenting in secret and putting it away somewhere, right? You want to let the employee actually talk to the employee, and you want to give the employee a chance to respond, because there could be a reasonable response to what the employee, to the performance issue. So you may think the report was late. You may not realize they had been out sick. You may think the report was late, but you may not realize that the client that they were waiting on for information to put in the report didn't respond. Now, I would say there you could still discipline them or talk with them about, you need to give me a status report and let me know. Don't just turn it in late. But there's a reasonable explanation. If you don't ask for that and give the employee a chance to respond, you will never know until you take the action, they file a claim, and then they tell their attorney that, well, the reason I got, they fired me for this, but here's the reasonable explanation that would have changed everything had you only asked. So the other reason is, if you don't ask now and document what they said, they could make anything up later when they have an attorney. So getting them to give their story so that you can respond. Then taking the next step, offer them support and discuss solutions. Don't just come in and say, you did this wrong. Let's talk about, do you need anything from me to help you correct this? Let's talk about solutions. What are your ideas, Eugene, for how you might avoid turning in a late report next time? And then going back to the expectations, being clear, this is what I expect going forward. This is the support I can offer you. Here are the consequences if you don't do this. And set a timeline. Let's check in 30 days. Or please send me a report every Friday about your status on this project. Let them know what you need. And then, especially if this was a verbal communication, followed up in writing. It can be a simple email. Thanks for meeting to discuss the late report you turned in. I'm glad we had a chance. You told me you didn't get it done because the client didn't call you back. We talked about next time letting me know if you're going to be late and why. And then I can redo my expectations. That will be your documentation of speaking to Eugene about the late report. It's not fancy. You don't have to say, this will confirm that I told you, right? It can just be a friendly document. If it is not the first time I've talked to you, though, maybe I do need to do a record of conversation that I give to you and that you sign to acknowledge receipt. So those are some ideas about how to document employee performance issues. And I would tell you that the really, really important thing is your supervisors need to be trained on this, because they are the front line. And if they come to HR and say, I want to get rid of this employee, and HR goes and says, show me the paperwork, and the paperwork is bad, if you call me, then we're going to be starting from ground zero on the documentation, and no one wants to hear that.
Okay. We have a couple of more questions. I just want to remind everyone that we will take a few of your questions if you want to start writing those in the chat, so when we're ready, we can jump right in. All right. So this next question is, what are some legal considerations to keep in mind when preparing to discuss or document an employee's performance issues?
Okay, so some legal considerations would be any what I call the protected class issues, which is there anything that the employee may say that the performance issue that you're bringing up really isn't the reason? Really, you are giving me a warning or disciplining me or terminating me because I am in a protected class. So my race, my religion, my sexual orientation, the fact that I have health issues and I ask for an accommodation in the workplace, my disability, the fact I just made a workers' comp claim, retaliating against me because I reported a legal issue or a safety issue. So wanting to make sure that that's not present. Now, nobody ever calls me and says, I want to terminate my employee because they just asked for a pregnancy leave. That never happens, right? And that's never the case, really. But it's my job to help identify what those potential issues might be. So I will often ask the client, will the employee see this coming? Is this going to be a surprise to them? Hopefully they tell me no, because they have a lot of documented performance conversations with this employee, in which case we can use that to show that this is not discrimination or retaliation. It's based on performance. I will always ask them, what do you think this employee will say is the real reason you disciplined or terminated them? Do you think they're going to raise a protected class? And I'll say, I know you'll disagree with the employee, but what do you think they're going to say? I'll ask how long the performance issue's been going on. And if it's for a while, were the previous issues documented? I'll ask to send me their prior performance reviews. If they're all glowing, we need to establish why it is now that we're wanting to take negative action. And I also, what I'll do is I'll put I look at the timeline, because one of the most key things that employees, attorneys do is they put everything in a timeline and they say, look, you had a negative review the day after someone told you they're pregnant and will need leave soon. And so I put it in a timeline. I go, what does it look like? What does the timeline look like? Because if it looks smelly, it probably is smelly, or at least the plaintiff's attorney is going to think it is, and I can help my client prepare for addressing that. And sometimes it means employing that person longer so we can get the documentation in place. The most common obstacles to getting a yes from me when someone calls me about an action is waiting until they can't take it anymore to contact me, because that's when we find out, gosh, you really don't have the documentation needed, so don't wait. The other thing is I'll often get calls from HR representatives who I'll go through the protected class issues, and they'll say, well, as far as I know, they haven't raised any medical issues, or as far as I know, they haven't done this or that. And I will say, you know what? The knowledge of your supervisors is considered the company's knowledge. So we need to bring them into the fold early. We need to have them on the calls, and HR needs to have a good understanding of what the supervisors have been doing. Nothing documented is another obstacle. Glowing performance reviews with nothing in between. Change in supervisors, where one supervisor was very positive because they were non-confrontational and didn't want to deal with the negative performance. Supervisors who don't manage their employees. You know, a lot of supervisors are good at what they do, but they're not good at the management side and don't realize it's really part of their job to manage. So they need to deal with these issues. So those are the things, the primary issues.
So document early, document often, document. Last question, and then we'll take any questions from our guests. When faced with employee performance issues, at what point should an employer consult with an employment attorney?
That's a great question. And one thing I want to say before I answer that is, make sure you consult with an employment law attorney. If they don't specialize in employment law, they are likely not to give you the best and most complete answer. So if you have general counsel or business counsel, make sure you talk to someone who has real experience in employment law, because California employment law doesn't always make what people consider good business sense. And so if you have someone who's not operating from experience and they're just kind of taking a gut reaction, a lot of times it's wrong under employment law. So basically, when you should contact an employment attorney, the earlier the better. The earlier the better, lets you help plan. But for sure, contact them when there are any obvious protected class issues. The primary ones I see are health issues or attendance issues, or long-time employees. The longer they've been there, the more that the employees argue, like, well, if I'm such a horrible employee, why have I been here for 25 years? And then if you know that employees are particularly litigious or very vocal about and confrontational with you, getting an attorney involved early can really help you manage the process and get to where you need to be quicker, whether that's improvement or moving the employee on because they haven't shown improvement.
Okay, well, we have a question from Stacy Gallagher. Hello, Stacy. And the question reads, do you have any recommendations for note-taking during conversations with employees, like apps, AI, or something like that could be used and maybe upheld legally, I guess.
Okay, so it is challenging when you're having a conversation with someone to keep up, right? And you're not really trying, you're not a court reporter trying to get every word that's said. You're trying to get the gist, but you'd like the documentation to be specific enough that a year from now, you're not going to look at it and say, what did that mean, right? Here's the challenge I have with AI in this context. It can be a wonderful tool, but AI often changes what you say. So I've been in meetings and I have seen the notes that come out of those meetings. And I've seen that AI not only records what you say, but they also characterize it. So I'll give you an example in my very own, in my own experience. I had a client who had several people leave around the same time, and they had exit interviews, and they asked each person, what were the reasons that they were leaving. And when I looked at the AI recordings or documentation of those meetings, I noticed common threads. Every single one of them mentioned lack of transparency. Now, not one of those employees used that term transparency. Not one of those employees had said, I don't think you're forthright. I think you're hiding things from me. I don't think you're clear. So AI characterized what the employee actually reported into some easily definable buzzwords, which to me means something far different than what those employees said. So as a result, I think AI could be very, very dangerous and harmful to a client if they wanted to use that documentation. And the whole purpose of the documentation is to use it. You're not doing it to just do it. So with the way, at least this particular app that this particular client used, if it records just what was said, that might be one thing. But if it's characterizing it or trying to summarize it and making up categories, I would not use that type of app because it's not going to be accurate. If you are going to use a tool, then make sure you review what it says and that you make corrections in real time. Use it as a tool, don't use it as a replacement. So amend it and say, well, that's helpful AI, but that's not exactly what was said. Here's what was said, and I'm going to write it down. But I also want to caution you, especially if you're a good keyboarder, don't hesitate to use your laptop. Don't hesitate to say, I want to make sure we get a good record of this. Please slow down, or could you repeat what you said? Don't be afraid to have long pauses between your statement and the next so that you can type it in. People are worried about filling the silence, but you shouldn't be. You should just say, hey, I want to make sure that this is accurate, and then send it to them after. And maybe you don't send them your notes, you just send them your summary and you say, thanks for meeting with me. We discussed ABC. So unless I find an app or AI that really records what was said and doesn't characterize it or mischaracterize it, I'm not ready to jump into that, but I think it's something to watch. The other thing I'll say is if people are tempted to record audio, be careful, because if you don't say something exactly right, you now have evidence of it. So when you record people, you have to keep it. You can't destroy it. And your employee may ask for a copy. It's also fair to make sure that the employee is not recording you. I have a lot of clients who say, I think my employee might have had their phone in their pocket. It's illegal in California to record people without their consent. So it's okay to start a meeting and say, I'm not recording this meeting. This is, informal meeting. I'm not recording it. Are you recording it? Let's put our phones on the desk.
Okay, you beat me to the question around consent to be recorded. I do know that there are some HIPAA approved recording AI things that are now being used during therapy sessions. And so I think that there may be some tools out there that might meet the need, but to your point, one must be very cautious. Second question, tips for having supervisors communicate better with HR regarding employee behavior or productivity outside of review periods. And that came to us from Angelina Baez.
Okay, that's a great question. So there are two ways to do it. One is you should train your supervisors that this is an expectation. When someone is made a supervisor, if they move from a non-supervisory position to a supervisory position, chances are they don't know what it means to be a supervisor. They don't know that in addition to, they may think they're just telling people what to do, right? They don't know what your expectations are, that, you're responsible for enforcing our policies. You're responsible for making sure your employees take compliant rest and meal breaks. You're responsible for letting us know if there are performance issues and addressing them. So training them on what it means to be a supervisor is number one. Number two, even if they did not promote within and they came into your organization as a supervisor, they don't know what you expect of your supervisors. So they still need training and expectations from you. If you find that there is a problem, in other words, they are not letting you know, or they don't understand the role of HR, then there are two ways you can either tell them, I want to hear from you every quarter, or I want to make this a part of our monthly check-in, or you can ping them every month or every quarter, whatever it might be. And then make sure when you evaluate the supervisor's performance that you evaluate the supervisory management part of their job. Because even if they are good at getting the service produced, if they are not enforcing your policies, if they are not documenting performance issues, they're not doing 100% of their job, and they need that feedback, expectations, tools, and consequences if need be.
Excellent, excellent. So I'm going to leave that there because we're out of questions, but I do want to thank you so much for being here. I'm going to put the slide back up that has all of your contact information so that if anyone wants to see it, and just to make a couple of announcements. One is that we are running a 2-day leadership program the first week of June in Santa Rosa. So if anyone's interested, all the information's on our website. And please stay tuned because there'll be more DILAN Delivers in the future. Let me bring that back up in case you want to grab Lisa's, and I'll see you soon, Lisa. Thank you again.
Thank you so much, Eugene. It was really great talking with you, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody. Bye now.
Bye-bye.